Hello, it's week 5 of season 7 of the Andy Griffith Show. This week's episode title is Aunt Bee's Crowning Glory. Aunt Bee and Clara are sitting in the kitchen talking about all the social events coming up in Mayberry over the next few days. It's because there's a visiting minister from Raleigh coming to town for 2 weeks. And then Aunt Bee goes to her hair appointment and she tells the hairdresser that her hairdos never last more than 2 days. And the hairdresser suggests a wig. And first Aunt Bee says she's not interested, but then she keeps asking questions about it. And then Floyd and Andy are talking in front of the barbershop about this new visiting minister. His picture's in the paper, and they're looking at it, and they're saying he's a fine-looking man. And they're also saying they heard that he's a bachelor. And then Aunt Bee comes out of the beauty parlor. And she's got a hat box in her hand, and Floyd thinks she's bought a new hat. But when it comes time to go to the reception that night for the minister, it turns out it was a wig that she bought, because she's wearing it. And first Andy thinks it's a dye job, but then when he finds out it's a wig, he don't like it at all. He tells Aunt Bee to go take it off. He don't want folks staring at her, but Aunt Bee don't want to, and Helen says it looks just fine. So Helen takes Aunt Bee with her, and she says, "Let's go." So at the reception, everyone stares at Aunt Bee when she walks in with Andy, and but the minister thinks everyone's staring at Andy. And so he tells Andy, "Oh, you must be an important man around here." And the other ladies there compliment Aunt Bee on her wig to her face, but they insult it behind her back. And then Floyd says off to the side that he read where a lot of wig hair comes from China, that the Reverend thinks it's her real hair, and he tells her she looks fashionable. And he says later he even wants to base his thirst sermon on his first impression of Mayday. How everyone is so pleasant, so natural, no pretense. And he says that while he's looking right at Aunt Bee. And then Clara agrees. Well, she makes a point to look at Aunt Bee. And he says, "Well then, that's it. I'll call my sermon, Be Yourself." And then he looks at Aunt Bee again. So the sermon the next day about being yourself makes Aunt Bee kind of uncomfortable while she's sitting there in the church pew wearing the wig that he doesn't know about when he's talking about people having no pretenses. And at the church, Clara and Aunt Bee are showing the Reverend around town in his car. And then he drops Aunt Bee off at the house while Andy and Ulti and Floyd are already in there playing checkers. It turns out he had dropped Clara off first, so he and Aunt Bee had some time alone in the car to talk. And Floyd keeps looking at her wig, and he tells her a lot of wig hair comes from China. And she asks him to stop, and then she goes upstairs. And then Andy asks him to stop too. He says it embarrasses Aunt Bee to have Floyd talk about her wig. And Floyd says, well, she's on dangerous ground, hanging around the Reverend like this, wearing that wig. If they get serious, sooner or later, he's going to find out it's a wig. And that night it's the Taylor's turn to host the Reverend over for supper. And Aunt Bee says she's going to wear her wig by the time he gets there. She says she's scared to let him know the truth about the wig after that sermon being about being so natural and without pretense. And she says she'll stop wearing it in 2 weeks when the Reverend has left town. But then he shows up early for supper, and she don't have the wig on. And Andy tells Ulti to go entertain him in the living room. And Andy has to go through the living room twice to go get her wig. And then he has to take a mirror from the living room into the kitchen. All of this while the Reverend is sitting there with Ulti. And finally Aunt Bee gets it on, and then they have a nice supper. And Helen is there too. And afterwards, Andy, Helen, and Ulti go in the kitchen to do the dishes, and Aunt Bee and the Reverend sit in the living room. And he says he's been offered a parish in Mount Pilot, and if he takes it, he'll be able to visit Mayberry folks, including Aunt Bee. So she comes clean about the wig, and she nervously tries to explain to him why she was wearing it. He says she doesn't have to explain. He's not disappointed in her at all. And then Helen and Andy come back out, and they find out that Aunt Bee told him, so they're relieved. But then Clara comes in, wearing a wig, and she starts monopolizing the conversation with the Reverend. And then a few days later, Andy is playing the guitar and singing a hymn on the front porch. And Aunt Dee tells Aunt Helen that she read on the toast card from the Reverend that he's not going to take the terrorist out toilet. The parishioners in Raleigh didn't want him to leave. So she says she didn't have to tell him about the wig after all. We'll see you next week for episode 6.